That song brings back great memories. Some of you won't know this. Some people on the live stream might actually know this. When I hear that song, I think about the Oban County Youth A Cappella Chorus, and Kim Womble sang that as a solo. So anyway, that's those people on the live stream. Well, somebody will get a chuckle out of that a long time ago. Who needs a shepherd? Who needs a shepherd? And obviously, the answer to this question is you do, okay? And but I need to go a little further than that before we start getting into it, because your shepherds also need a shepherd. And that is why in 1 Peter chapter 5, when Peter is writing about shepherds, he says there is a chief shepherd, and when that chief shepherd appears. So you need a shepherd, and shepherds who shepherd you need a shepherd, and there is one who is the chief shepherd. So before we jump into this, I want to make sure that we I want to make sure that we have that structure all in place in our heads, right? So there's the chief shepherd, then there's shepherds, and then there's a flock. And we have, I appreciate what Stevie said about, in the words before communion, some things that we have learned from 2020. And, 2020 has created kind of a different type of scenario in our culture, hasn't it? And some aspects of that scenario will never change. I mean, you just have to realize that some of those things will just continue. There was a great interview with, I think he was the CEO of Zoom, and I don't know if anybody saw this several months ago, but the CEO of Zoom was calling out all the problems that Zoom was having, especially when they went to virtual learning and all the classrooms started using Zoom and all of that stuff started. And he said, we never intended that this would be our business model. They had a much smaller business model in place, and then when COVID started and the pandemic started and everybody started social distancing and everybody decided, well, we'll do everything by virtual conference, they were just absolutely overwhelmed. And those types of things, virtual conferences and virtual meetings, people working from home, a lot of those things will never change. They won't go back to something they were before all of this happened. And it creates kind of unique, unique difficulties, unique problems, and unique opportunities for churches, doesn't it? Because now we struggle with, what do you do with a flock that's in some ways, if we're not careful, it's kind of scattered. Now, anybody watch like Animal Kingdom, Animal Planet, and all of those kind of shows? There's some smiles out there, so some of you are watching that kind of stuff. And I'm not an expert on that. Could be very honestly, I don't watch that at all. But I know that here we have some people who are worshiping in person, and I just want you to know, I love seeing your faces, right? We were, anybody watch NFL games last night? We were watching one of those NFL games, and so, maybe it would have been a basketball game, I don't know, some kind of sports. So, but anyway, there are two people sitting, like, in the stadium, and then all around them, all they have is the cardboard cutouts. And I am so happy that when I look out and see, I don't see a cardboard cutout. I am happy to see your smiling face. I love it when I can see you paying attention. I love it when I can see you're not paying attention. I just love being able to see you. So when I see you nod because you're listening, and when I see you nod because you're nodding off, all of that stuff is good because that's interaction, and I love all of those things. So I like that you are here physically in person, sitting in a seat this morning. But not everybody is here sitting in a seat, are they? There are some people in the live stream, and they're listening to us today, and I know they're behind that camera somewhere, and I'll look at analytics later, and I'll see how many people watched on Facebook, and how many people watched on YouTube, and how many people watched on the website, and we put all those numbers together, and I know they're out there. Some of them are members that normally would be sitting in a seat, but they choose not to because of COVID and because of some other things that are going on, or maybe they're taking care of someone and they can't. Some people on the other side of that camera are people, honestly, we've never met. They're in states, I don't even know who they are. I mean, maybe there's some of your relatives that are tuning in. Maybe it's somebody who found us online. I have no idea, but we have this digital audience as well. And kind of the point of the sermon is, as elders, whether you are listening on the live stream or you're here in person, you're our flock. You're our flock. Now, remember that Animal Kingdom show? See, I'm not an expert on those, but I do know this. One of the hunting techniques of a lion is if a lion can catch an animal who's separated from the flock. Right? So if they can catch one that's separated from the flock, they can isolate that one out and they can attack that one. So, if you're a student of history and you are a student, I mean, what I really enjoyed reading was World War II history. Okay, and particularly in World War II history, like what I like to read was all about the airplanes and the Air Force and the bomber formations and fighter pilots. And I read book after book after book after book. And I probably would have never gotten through elementary school except for a teacher who started bringing me those books, because that was the only thing I think they could do to kind of capture my attention. I think I'm ADD. So we had all of that going on, right? But if there is a bomber and he starts to drop out of the formation, he becomes an easy target because he's out of the formation. He's out of the protection of the other airplanes. If it's an animal, they're out of the protection of the rest of the flock. And I know that is a tactic. I also know that Satan is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And I also know that one of the techniques he will use, if he can find a believer in Jesus who becomes separated from the flock, he will use that as an opportunity to drag that person away from the flock of God. And so when we think about flocks and shepherds, I mean, there is this responsibility that we feel to protect you. Now, there are kind of, instead of reading verses, I'm going to read a couple, but I'm pulling some of this from 1 Peter chapter 5. I'm pulling some from 1 Timothy chapter 3. I'm pulling some from Titus chapter 1. I'm pulling some from Acts chapter 20. So if you want to write those things down and go back and look at those later. In that collection of passages, there are these, I can't advance that, Reggie, for some reason. Wrong one. Okay, now maybe I got it. There are three words that kind of, there are other words, but three primary words that kind of describe a function of an eldership. Our responsibility is, and we're going to go through each one of these, one is to oversee, to take care of you, to guard you. Another word that is used means that we shepherd you, and it's also a word that means to feed. We feed. There is a word that is used to manage someone. Or to lead someone, not in a compulsive way. We're talking about leading or managing here. It's used of one who might manage his household. It's used to take care of somebody or to care for somebody. In fact, one of those words, the only other place that it's used in the New Testament is when the Good Samaritan cares for the man who was robbed. So that's kind of the idea, not that we manage and lead and force, but because of our concern for you, our love for you, we care for you, we shepherd you, we take care of you. So how do we do that? Well, one way is we're responsible for feeding you. We're responsible for feeding you. And I don't mean in a physical sense. It can be in a physical sense, actually, when things are going badly, but in a spiritual sense. The elders who direct the affairs of the church are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. That's part of our responsibility. We are supposed to be the people in this congregation who are students of the Word. We study the Word, we teach the Word, we preach the Word, we share the Word, we make interpretations of the Word. We are to be people of God's text. I want you to know that, and I didn't ask the other elders if I could speak for them, so I'm only going to speak for this one, but I think it's okay if I just say I'm speaking for all of them. That is a tremendous responsibility. If I gave each of you a Bible text and said, read that text and tell me what it means, I would venture to guess that not all of you would have the same interpretation. I would venture to guess there would be some differences among us. And I know that to be true. As a church body, sometimes we get to a portion of Scripture and somebody has to decide how we as a church body will interpret that Scripture. And the elders are responsible for that, and that is a huge responsibility. That doesn't mean with it you can't disagree with us. It doesn't mean that you have to take our interpretation. No, you don't. No, you don't. Even in that group of men, there may be differences of interpretation. But when there are multiple and it gets to be like we have to interpret it one way or the other, then the elders are responsible for that. And we are going to be judged more strictly because of that. The Scripture is pretty clear. Those who choose to teach are going to be judged more strictly. And we take that very, very seriously. In fact, James, I may have put this on a slide. I don't remember if I did or not. I didn't. It says, "Not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly." Now, there's another part, and the elders are responsible for protecting the flock from false teachers. That's also a pretty big responsibility, isn't it? Even as early as the New Testament, you're not very far in church history before the New Testament gets all put together. Even if you use those who take the latest dates, and I say this because Shaw and I, it's okay to say that in Shaw, we take some different dates on when certain books of the Bible were written. And so he's earlier than I am, I'm later. And so even if you take my dates, it's all completed by 96 AD, 96 to 100 AD. The text is already written. All of the books that we read are already written down by 100 AD. Before they're all written down, there are already discussions about how to interpret it correctly. Do you realize that even fairly early on, there are writers who say, oh, now remember, there are going to be false teachers who show up that try to pervert the truth. So it's not anything new. It's been around since the very beginning of Christianity. And trying to protect from false teachers, to reprove, to convict those who are teaching something that's not healthy doctrine. Just look at the text, right? In Acts chapter 15, the first big theological struggle in the church, and one we're discussing on Wednesday night, by the way. If you want to turn into the Wednesday night live stream, you can hear that. Is what are we going to do about people who insist that Christians should keep Old Testament law? And then that leads to a bigger question. But when they get ready to answer that question, do you remember who they went to in Acts chapter 15? The apostles and the elders. And they had to wrestle and struggle with that problem. See that illustrated in Titus 1:9. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. What else do elders do? Oh yeah, we just tell you what to believe about the Bible, right? Man, you talk about a very specific verse. Is any one of you sick? He should call the elders of the church to pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. You know what you're supposed to do if you're sick? We're supposed to be praying over you. Now, whether we come and do that as a group to you, or whether we do that individually as a group, whether we've had people here who said, hey, can you come anoint us with oil? We've done that. I've had people who ask me, can you come anoint me with oil? And I've done that. If you're sick, whose responsibility is it to pray for you? It's ours. And when I say ours, I mean the elders. I'm talking about the 8 elders who are at this church. It is our responsibility to pray for you when you are sick. Man, it's hard to pray for people who are sick if you don't know if they're sick, right? So what else is part of our responsibility? Well, we're supposed to know if you're sick. We're supposed to be finding those kind of things out. Now, hopefully, if you're sick, you would call us. But if not, it's still our responsibility to pray over you. And I'll be honest with you, I think that is an incredibly important verse. I think that is an incredibly important verse. If I ever get really sick, I'm just telling you up front right now, okay? If I get really sick, I obviously will already be there, but the other 7 of you, I want y'all to come anoint and pray over me. I think we need to practice that verse more often than we practice it. But not just taking care of the sick. I talked about feeding the flock. Should we feed the flock? How about just physically feeding the flock? Is that important? when there was going to be a famine and they took up money for the churches in Judea. When they took up money for the churches in Judea and Paul and Silas took it to Jerusalem, who did he give it to? Anybody remember? To the elders. Why did he give it to the elders? So the elders could distribute the money to the church so that they could be fed in time of a famine. Are there times that spiritual and physical needs need to be addressed by the church? Yes, there are. Absolutely. Is our responsibility to help with those? Absolutely. When you talk about collecting money for the church and you talk about church contribution, honestly, building expense and that kind of stuff ought to be pretty low on the list. What's that money generally supposed to be for? If you go back and read Acts, those who had a need, what did the church do? They met the need. There are no needy persons among them. They met the needs of the people in their community, in their fellowship. And I'm glad our building looks great, by the way. We spent money, updating the building and new carpet and, comfortable seats so y'all can sleep better while I'm preaching. And we put stuff downstairs, and so we painted all the walls. The building looks good. But you know what? The collection of the saints is not primarily to make a building look good. It's not to pay the electric bill. It's to take care of each other. And it's our responsibility to help and to know about that. Boy, and the tough one is First Peter. So be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, serving as overseers, not because you must, but because you are willing as God wants you to be, not greedy for money, but eager to serve, not lording it over those who entrusted you, but being examples to the flock. Boy, if you want to know the verse that really grinds on me, that is the verse about being an elder that grinds on me. Being examples to the flock. Man, that is a humbling one. That is a humbling one. When Paul writes something like, imitate me as I imitate Christ, you're not going to hear that from this pulpit. You'll hear me saying that about Paul. You'll hear me saying, Paul wrote, imitate me as I imitate Christ. You will not hear me saying, imitate Greg as Greg imitates Christ. No, you won't hear that because that's a struggle, isn't it? To be an example to the flock. To be a leader. Not telling people what to do, but showing people what to do by a godly life. Now, there's an interesting thing about all of that. Sometimes flocks don't really want to be led. Have you ever had somebody to say, well, why don't you just stay out of my business? You ever had anybody say that to you? Well, why don't you just let me handle that? And you just handle what you're supposed to handle. And so then you're trying to shepherd the flock, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we shepherd and lead spiritually, but we don't want to be meddlesome, right? So you're trying to balance all of that out. And there's this passage in Ezekiel that's not really about elders. It's about Ezekiel, but I think there's an incredible principle in that. You can find this in fact, we'll just read part of it. This is Ezekiel chapter 3. You can also find the same thing in Ezekiel chapter 33. You can say some of the same terminology. God says to Ezekiel, Son of man, I made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. If I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give them no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way in order to save his life, that wicked person will die for his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand. But if you warn the wicked, and he does not turn from his wickedness or from his wicked way, he shall die for his iniquity, but you will have delivered your soul. Again, if a righteous person turns away from his righteousness and commits injustice, I will lay a stumbling block before him, and he shall die. And because you have not warned him, he shall die for his sin, and his righteous deeds that he has done shall not be remembered, but his blood I will require at your hand. But if you warn the righteous person not to sin, and he does not sin, he shall surely live because he took warning, and you will have delivered your soul. Now, I know that's not specifically about elders, but it's about a watchman who is supposed to be guarding the flock of Israel, the flock of God, which I think is a great comparison to elders who are supposed to guard and shepherd the flock of God. What did you get from those verses? If you are doing evil, and I know that, and I'm your shepherd, and I don't warn you, what's going to happen? You're going to be punished for your sin, but what's going to happen to me? I'm going to share that because I knew it and I didn't warn you. If I warn you and you take heed, I can save your soul. And if I don't warn you, I will share in that responsibility. And I know you're saying, well, Greg, that's Ezekiel and that's Israel and that's a watchman over Israel. Don't take that too. I take that pretty seriously. Take that pretty seriously. In 1 Corinthians 5, when there was sin that was going on within the church, it doesn't specifically say that the elders took care of that in 1 Corinthians 5, but Paul did write that to the entire church body and said, hey, look, don't allow that to exist within your fellowship. Keeping you spiritually safe, guarding you, shepherding you, keeping you on the right path, warning you when you do evil, helping you find the right path. That is what we are supposed to be about. So the elders are responsible for guiding you on your journey to eternal life, and we're responsible for your spiritual condition. And that is a huge, huge responsibility, and very honestly, I can understand why some people decide they don't want to take that role because of the serious nature of it. And here we are, trying to shepherd our flock. Some of you, thankfully, are here. Some of you are behind that camera that's mounted on that back wall up there. And one of the struggles through this whole pandemic has been, how do we do that? How do we do that? To know your needs, we have to be around you. We have to communicate with you. To know what's going on in your life, we have to have some kind of communication with you. I mean, God, I know this is surprising to you, but God just did not give us this kind of vision that we know instantly everything that's happening with somebody when it happens to them. Because sometimes I get messages that said, well, you didn't call me when I was sick. Well, I didn't know you were sick. You know, so now part of that's my fault, right? Part of that's my fault because I didn't call and ask you if you were sick. Part of it's your fault because you didn't let me know you were sick, because phones do work both ways. I don't know if y'all noticed this, that you can dial out on them and you can also take a call from them. So it's really a neat kind of thing that it works that way. But how are we going to do that? So let me tell you what's going to happen. Every member in this church is going to be contacted by an elder every month. Okay, now I'm putting these guys on the spot. They know who they're supposed to call. They know which month they're supposed to call them. They're not calling to meddle in your business. They're calling to make sure that they make communication with you and to make sure that you're okay. We're basically going to ask you 3 questions when we call you, just so you know. You can plan ahead now. You can get you a piece of paper, write down your answers. So when you get the phone call, you know, oh yeah, let me answer those 3 questions for you. Now, you may have something other than this to say, and we'll be happy to listen to that as well, okay? Now, you will not get called by every elder this month. You will only get called by one, and next month you'll get called by a different one, okay? So through the course of 8 months, you'll talk to all of them, because there's 8 of us. How you doing? That's the first question. How y'all doing? Now, if you're not doing good, don't tell us you're doing good. You know, if we call you, we say, how you doing? And you say, man, I'm just doing wonderful. And then you hang the phone up and you say, man, they didn't even take care of it. We didn't know you were doing bad. You told us you were doing good, right? If you're not doing good, tell us you're not doing good. So how are you doing? And if you don't know how you're doing, you say, I'm not really sure how I'm doing. Okay, let's talk about that for a few minutes. All right, so how are you doing? First question. Now, they may ask you more than this, but this is the 3 I gave them. All right, what can I pray for? That's a great question. That's a great question. What's happening in your life? What can I pray for? You know, I got a cousin who's sick. Take care of that. My wife's not feeling well. Take care of that. You know, I'm just kind of struggling with this whole COVID thing and isolation and loneliness and you know, you might be a widow or you might be a single person and you're just really struggling with going through life. Not, you know, we just don't have all the social interaction that we had before. How can I pray for you? What can I pray for? Now, when we ask the question, tell us, right? Now, the elders don't know this yet because I forgot to discuss all this, but they're going to send all of those to me, right? And then I'm going to compile them all into a list. We're going to share them with all the elders, so all the elders will know what you're supposed to pray for. Now, the other thing is, we're not going to go tell anybody, all right? So if you got something that's kind of personal that you want us to pray for, and you say, now look, I don't want that, I don't want anybody else to know about that, just tell us, hey, I don't want anybody else to know that. We're pretty good at keeping secrets. Now, when you tell them you don't want anybody else to know, let them know, does that mean none of the elders or outside of the elders? It might be something you don't want any of the elders to even know. You just might want to share that, like if Jeff Goldtrap is your guy, and he calls you this week. And maybe next week, sometime in January. So he called you, and you say, Jeff, I'd really want you to pray for this, but I don't want anybody to know. Jeff is going to, I hope he's asked, does that mean the rest of the elders? And if you say yes, then he says, I will tell nobody else. And he will just pray for that himself. And if you say, well, I don't mind you sharing it with the elders, but I don't want it in the church bulletin. Okay, we'll share it with the other elders. Now, if you're one of those people who want it in the church bulletin, tell them you want it in the church bulletin. You know, the church bulletin is an amazing thing, too. You know, let me tell you how that works. I'm being facetious here, so y'all just know this. Jackie sits in her office on Thursday, and she closes her eyes, and instantly all of your thoughts go into her head about everything that's supposed to be in the bulletin. Now, if you don't know that's a joke, you call me later, right? Because that is not the way it works. You know, because it's sometimes it's difficult. And you hear something, you say, what do they want that in the bulletin or not? What is it okay to put in there? It's difficult. It's difficult. That's not always an easy decision. If you have something that you want in the bulletin, you tell them you want it in the bulletin, they'll get it to Jackie. How can I help you? That's different than how can I pray for you? How can I help you? How can I help you? Maybe you have a financial need and you don't want anybody else to know about it. Then you tell one of the elders and you tell them, hey, I don't want anybody else to know about this except maybe the other elders, but I need some help. I'm struggling. That's what churches are for. Maybe there's something else going on. Man, you know, I got a doctor's appointment next week and I don't have anybody that'll take me. Is there any way you can find somebody to take me to the doctor's? Yeah, let us know. You know, I'm not feeling well. I don't really feel like I should get out, but I need some stuff from the grocery store, and I need medicine. Can somebody go to the pharmacy for me? Can somebody go to the grocery store for me? Let us know. You know, I have people almost every week that call me and say, is there something I can do for somebody? And if I don't have anybody they can do something for, I tell them no. And if you're sitting out there needing somebody to do it, let us know that you need it done. Now, we're going to do another thing that's a little differently, too. I appreciate Stevie calling me preacher man earlier. You didn't know that you were playing right. God gave that to you so you could play right into my sermon. There's an app. It's called Calendly, CALENDLY.com, Calendly.com. And if you go to Calendly.com/preacherman, you're going to find my page. Now, this is an interesting little page, and let me tell you what it does. You don't have to use this, but it's there if you want to. Let's say that you are wanting to talk to somebody, but you don't want to get out. You don't want me to come to your house. You don't want to come to my house. You really want something a little more than just a telephone call. You'd like to see somebody's face. If you go to that website and you pick a day, it will tell you what days I have available for a Zoom call. You schedule that Zoom call. It will send me an email saying, hey, this person wants to talk to you at this time, and it'll send you an email saying, here is your link to the Zoom call. Now, that's the way that's supposed to work, and I tried it and it worked. So if it doesn't, call and let me know. We might have to massage just a little bit to make it work right. But you can go to Calendly.com/preacherman, and you can make an appointment with me. We can talk for 15 minutes, we can talk for 30 minutes, or we can talk for an hour, whichever one you want. When you decide how long you want to talk to me when you make the appointment. So you just go there, you click on it. It says, I forgot what it says. It says, welcome to my scheduling page for a one-on-one Zoom call. Schedule a call if there is something I can help you with, or if you just want to chat, so you don't even have to have a reason to call. Please follow the instructions to send an event to my calendar. 15-minute call, 30-minute call, 60-minute call. Man, I ain't talking none of y'all more than 60 minutes, so that was it. All right? And you say, Greg, who in the world is going to use that? I don't know. But I can promise you this, somebody will. Somebody who needs a call, somebody who needs a chat, somebody who just wants to see a face, somebody listening to that live stream, they may be in another state somewhere, I may not even know them. And if you're listening to this live stream and I don't even know who you are, and you say, man, I'd like to chat with you, you go there and make an appointment, I'll chat with you. I'll chat with you. Sometimes it's a struggle, guys, to figure out how to maintain that communication, how to maintain shepherding a flock when sometimes you don't see the flock. Who needs a shepherd? You need a shepherd. You need someone that you know cares, someone that's concerned about you, someone that loves you, someone that's willing to reach out to you. Now, I didn't ask any of the other elders for confession, okay? So we're not going to have a confession moment, but I am going to tell you up front, at least personally, I don't really think we've done a good job with that. I don't think we've done a good job with that. I think there are people in our community, in our church family, who are wanting to talk to somebody and don't really know how to do it. I think there are people who can't come in here and they don't know how to get into contact with somebody. We haven't done a good enough job of calling and checking on them. And very honestly, you know, I'm not sharing blame, but you haven't done a good enough job of calling and checking with us. You know, again, not pointing fingers at anybody. I just think that's something we can do a much, much, much better job with. We love you. And we're concerned about you. And we know some of you don't feel comfortable coming back to the building. And this is not a sermon saying, hey, man, we need you back in the fellowship. No, you have to use your own rationale, your own judgment, your own decision about that. I'd be the very last person to tell you you need to be here. Is community important? Yes, it's important. Is church community important? Yes. There's a reason that God made us a community. You know, the word ecclesia that we translate church just means assembly, don't you? It just means a group of people. That's what we are. We're a group of people, whether we are meeting physically or we're meeting physically and digitally or we're just meeting digitally. We are still the same ecclesia. We are still the same community. So whether you're listening on that live stream or you're sitting in this auditorium, you need a shepherd. And one of the things that I am committed to doing, and I think the other elders are committed to doing it as well. You know, I didn't ask them about this. I didn't sit down with them this morning and say, hey, is it okay if I preach this sermon? I just preached it, and if I'm here next week, they're okay with it. All right, so, but really just to build community. You are our family. You're our flock, and we are your shepherds. And we want to do a better job of being your shepherds. When the chief shepherd appears, because I need a shepherd too. The only question as I finish is when the chief shepherd appears, are you ready to be in the flock? When he appears to gather his flock, are you in the flock? Because if you're not in the flock, if you're not a believer in Jesus, if you haven't confessed faith in Jesus, if you haven't confessed and repented and been baptized, if you haven't made that faith response to Jesus, I would tell you there is nothing more important than this entire world than making a faith response to Jesus through repentance, confession, baptism, and godly living. And if you need to do that this morning, I'm going to ask you to do that while we stand and sing.